Hello losers as well, and in today's video we're basically just going to be going over a few questions that I actually posed to the community. I think it was like a couple of days ago from now. No, actually it was on New Year's Eve. On New Year's Eve I asked the entire Dead by Daylight community, mostly the community on Twitter, um, what what they think about DBD. Is it fun? Is it balanced? And any ideas that they might have when it actually comes to balance. And honestly, with the amount of feedback that I got, the amount of like replies and answers that I got, I actually just want to go through them like one by one, and talk about like which ones are healthy for the game and which ones I feel like are unhealthy or are like good ideas and bad ideas. So starting off with question one, which is what is fun in Dead by Daylight, and if given the option, would you balance the game around this? Would you balance around this area of the game to make it more fun? And the first answer comes from Quinn, one of my chatters, who says, the cases, in my opinion, the different ways you interact with and use different powers and how they affect places keeps the gameplay engaging and fun. Plus, map RNG. I feel like this is tough to balance around though. I feel like through a lot of the answers that I've actually read, because I read these answers like beforehand before this video, a lot of people think that place and gameplay interaction between the two sides is actually where most of the fun for Dead by Daylight actually comes from. So in my opinion, I feel like balancing around case and balancing around player interaction is actually should be the way forward. But I understand as well that the game for a very long time has actually been balanced around generators. I feel like changing a lot of the base game mechanics to go around case, to go around these different like areas of Dead by Daylight and its gameplay might actually be better than the current state of balance in the game. Because I feel like killers are relying way too much on Gen slowdown, which makes them more stressed, and therefore, if they're stressing about Gen slowdown, then traces don't feel as impactful and don't feel as fun. So, yeah, I do feel like balancing around case is actually like the best way forward, especially for fun and also for skill representation, because a lot of the skill representation, if not all of the skill representation if in Dead by Daylight, actually comes from the mechanical and game sense, like the mechanical skill and the game sense that actually goes into casing. So yeah, I feel like this is actually a really good answer by Quinn. So the next one is from Nerf Lightborn. I think the really neat fun about the game is a potential variety, not only in killer and perk choice, but also playstyles that exist within specific killers and perk choices. I enjoy not knowing exactly what I'm going to see when loading in, both in terms of teammates and the killer. Yeah, that's actually very fair. There's RNG variables that actually are outside of map RNG, killer RNG and stuff like that, and not knowing what you're actually going to be bumping into, especially on the killer side or even on the survivor side, is extremely interesting, and the way that you adapt around that as a killer or as a survivor is, I think, like also another facet of fun that I don't feel like a lot of people actually talk about. So this is actually really cool for Knife Lightborn to bring up. Sneaky says, fun for me is variety and interaction. The kind of a hard thing to balance around, but nice when it's kept in mind. Yes, I completely agree. Like I said with Quinn's answer, case is something that is very like variable with the maps and everything, but it does feel like on a lot of maps, it is hard to interact with the other side, especially Mother's Dwelling, especially these large open maps, where the survivors could be hiding anywhere. It does get very hard to actually find fun in a lot of the games that you're playing. Damien says, Trace is what makes a game fun. Remove Calm Spirit, Bite the Bullet, Urban and Distortion, and make your gens take 200 seconds. And give everyone 4 stages. Remove all gen perks from both sides, excluding Deadlock and Corrupt, and boom, the game is all about casing. I feel like that's a very good idea, and it does go towards... Oh, sorry, let me just quickly... I have to cut this out. I do feel like this is actually a good like set of changes. that could be implemented, especially making the game more case dependent and more case based. But I do feel like there's going to be a lot of backlash to this, and I feel like Behaviour is very scared of backlash. But if I was on the dev team, I would definitely introduce this, honestly, or probably as like a separate mode, or maybe just change the whole of the base game to actually go along with this. So I completely agree with Damien here. Suma says, impressive cases and skill interaction makes the game fun. Winning, overcoming a challenge is even more fun, but winning with no challenge is worse than losing. Completely agree. I feel like the game has a very like 50-50 chance to put you against good players and bad players. And I feel like that's more of an MMR issue than anything. But I do agree that sometimes the games don't feel as challenging and don't feel as impactful or like as enjoyable because you're just stomping or you're going against people who are like 6,000 hours like ahead of you, and so on and so forth. So I completely agree with that, with what Sue was saying. Machi says, for me, the most fun is honestly the grind. Leveling up characters and getting to know the perks and the powers is what I like most. I would like a little boost without it being instant leveling up or something. I do agree that the Blood Red system needs to be faster, or there has to be like an alternative to that system to be put in place, because it is it takes way too long to get through the blood webs. But honestly, yeah, like learning new mechanics, learning different techs and stuff like that is extremely fun, honestly. So I completely agree, honestly. It does feel bad that Behaviour are going in the route of like removing techs and certain mechanics, but yeah, what can you do about it? April Ghost says, I believe DBD is multiple similar mini games in one. Every killer should be their own unique challenge for both sides. It can be a strategy game, a fighting game, an FPS, hide and seek, or some combo of all of them. They should not be too similar. Focus on making each one fair. Completely agree. I feel like every single like killer at the moment does have their own kind of like niche, or their own like kind of like niche power, or their own kind of niche like play style to go against and to also play as. Probably one of the biggest examples of this that is actually game changing is probably I would say either Plague or Onryo, honestly, because they do actually change up the game. They do actually add like a different objective on top of the generators. So yeah, I do feel like they do need to kind of like double down on that concept of you know, killers having their own kind of like niche. And honestly, I do see where Ghost is coming from. She says that there's a lot of killers that are similar. Especially with the last few killers, Cookie, Wesker, they feel similar. They feel way too similar, and honestly, it does feel like they're like mix and matching like a lot of stuff. But hopefully down the line we can actually see more unique killers, kind of in the same vein as like, you know, like Xenomorph. Like Xenomorph was actually pretty cool with changing up like the entire game with the flamethrowers and stuff. Great answer by Ghostly. Grim says, the variety of the tons of builds that you can do, the amazing cosmetics and the clips that you can do with this game. I don't know about balancing the game. I just want some perks and killers to feel good to use. Yeah, completely. I feel like that's something that a lot of people are going to be parroting, honestly, because like it is something that has been heavily heavily looked over, especially by Behaviour, is the fun and the impact and the, you know, like the skillful usage of powers, especially Slice and Dice, with a lot of stuff that was taken away from that. The second question was, is the current way of balancing the game damaging or positive for all players? Explain your answer further if possible. Quinn says damaging. A lot of perks lately have been way too overtuned, and recent character reworks and changes seem to be simplifying everything down too much. Everything is doable with the click of a button or two now, regardless of how strong said action might be. Completely agree. But I do feel like there's a lot of skillful mechanics that are still in the game. But I do agree that it feels like we are heading in that direction where they are. I hate to call it this, but it is kind of like the Overwatch effect, where Overwatch was heavily inspired by TF2, but then it took a lot of TF2's mechanics and then basically boiled it down to one mouse click or one button press. Especially with like Flower being the spiritual successor to Soldier in TF2, whereas in TF2 there was a lot of movement tech. In Overwatch, you literally just need to press thrusters and that's it, and then you just in the air. So I do feel like that kind of effect is happening to Dead by Daylight, and I hate it. But I'm hoping that we can actually go into a direction where that isn't the case anymore. Nerf Lightborn says, I think that when a dev can have access to the amount of raw statistical data that they have, it can be tempting to let exclusively that govern design. But I think extremes, not just the average, should be considered when making big decisions. There's something to be said for making the worst case scenario more palatable, I think that's it. I recognise, however, that this is tricky and not super obvious when we see approaches taken like this in the case of killer power or skill expression, and I feel it's mostly bad. I agree, yeah. I feel like what Nerf Lightborn is getting at is basically, like Quinn was saying, a lot of the skillful mechanics and techs kind of being taken out of the game, regardless of if they are healthy or unhealthy for the game. So I feel like behavior kind of needs to get in touch with the community a bit more and actually see, like, if the community enjoys going against it or enjoys doing that tech, then it should actually stay in the game. Kind of like Wesker's techs. Wesker's techs are inherent to his design to the point that if you take away any of his techs, he's just really boring. He's basically just a worse blight at that point. So I completely agree with Lightborn there. Damien says, definitely positive. Behavior is doing a great job at the moment, especially with the FOV Sido and Blight nerfs. We still need a for the people buckle up, save the best for last. Pain Wes pop combo nerf though. Yeah, there's a lot of things that need to be nerfed, but honestly, compared to the past, they are being very... It is a positive with the way that they are balancing the game nowadays, but I do feel like there's a very long way to go. But to be honest, devil's advocate, there is a lot of positives going on with the way that behavior is balancing the game nowadays. They seem to be more community focused, but it does feel like they have a very long way to get to the point that they can be competing with other games, kind of like, like, I don't want to say Overwatch, but kind of like, other smaller games, kind of like the finals or something like that. I don't know a lot of like smaller games, so excuse me if I'm bad at like pointing them out, but you get the gist. Like, it feels like they are way too slow, but at the same time, when they actually bring out a good update, it's normally a really good update. So yeah, it's definitely positive. Completely agree with Damien there. Suma says damaging, but making it good for everyone will be really hard. I think they should use a top-down model and balance for a fun meta, and make tweaks to unused perks so they see more use at lower skill levels. I feel like this is what they were going towards with the big perk update, but then they actually just stopped. So this would be interesting if they actually start doing this, but at the same time, I feel like they're already moving towards this. They're just being really slow. But I completely see where Suma's coming from, like, for well. Ghost says, I think that they're doing their best in terms of balance and have actually gotten better and better over the years. I believe MMR massively hurt the fun for veterans, probably didn't help newer players much, but who knows. But I guess I see that as a separate issue from balance. I kind of like group up MMR with balance. And the reason why I do that is because MMR inherently... MMR impacts balance inherently. That's just how it is. When you have an MMR model, you're using the statistics from that MMR model in order to balance the game. But at the same time, I can see how people can disconnect that from balance. They can disconnect MMR from balance. But yeah, I feel like a lot of the issues nowadays are because of MMR. But at the same time, it's so deep-rooted into the game at the moment that we can't really go back now, and we're kind of stuck with it. But it doesn't feel like behavior is being fast enough in order to update this game with that model in place. And that's my issue, mostly. Machi says, I think it's unfortunate. How I see it is something doesn't go to plan, and it favors one side heavily. Then they change it, but somehow mess another thing up, and now it favors the other side. And that in constant ping pong. It does feel like that sometimes. I feel like the biggest point of that, the biggest point of contention, was right after the eruption. Right after the eruption change, we got end transmission, and then we got May for this for a couple of months, and that basically yeah, like everyone was just running it all the time, and it just heavily damaged a lot of killers, especially 110s. But I don't feel like it's a ping pong effect. I feel like um, those two issues, because of a negativity bias, a lot of people remember those two issues way more than a lot of the positive things that have come after that. But in my opinion, to answer this question, I feel like the balance of the game at the moment is way more positive than it used to be. But I don't feel like it's positive in the way that it should, when compared to a lot of games that are using kind of the same balancing system. Behavior needs to be faster, behavior needs to be more impactful, and behavior needs to listen to the community more. Because it feels like they're working on statistics that are years old instead of, statistics that are up to date and are, so they can balance towards, DBD now instead of DBD back then. They're using like data from 2020 when they should be using data from 2024. So overall, positive compared to the past, but I don't feel like we're getting there just yet. But I do have faith that behavior can actually get there. Question 3 was, should text and unintended mechanics have the ability to be treated just like intended mechanics? Give examples if possible. And basically what this is basically, should text be treated like a thing that's actually in the game, and should the game be balanced around them? Quinn says, case by case basis. Highly mechanical stuff that takes practice to master and isn't too exploitable is fine. E.g., Scancel, Wesker slides, but if the tech itself is wildly too easy or downright exploitable, then I reckon it does. To be honest, Scancel is very easy to do. All you do is let go of right click. But with like Wesker's techs are extremely hard to pull off if you don't know how to do them first, and also they take a lot of skill to pull off. So I feel like the skill that you need to put in order to pull them off actually makes it worth keeping it in the game, because people are getting better. People can show off their skill. They can represent their skill on this killer, and so on and so forth. So yeah, I do feel like on a case by case basis, you do need to keep your ear to the ground and kind of listen to the community. But at the same time, I feel like there will be a lot of backlash for this. Like, they'll fix some stuff from Blight, but they won't fix stuff from Wesker, and therefore the Blight community will get angry and stuff. But at the end of the day, if you want the game to be balanced and you want the game to be fun, you kind of do have to have that level of favoritism, or that level of, this is healthy and this isn't. You kind of need to know where the line is and kind of work towards that, if that makes sense. Niall says, Wesker Hug Tech is a clear example of a technique that takes time and skill to master, not something that you can just simply pick up. Kind of like what Quinn said. Yep, a lot of techs that are skillful should stay in the game. Meanwhile, techs that are just brain dead easy should just be taken out of the game and replaced with something different, or something that inherits traits of that tech, but adds it to the base kit power of that killer, if that makes sense. Lightborn says, I think if a tech provides a clear opportunity for skill expression, and does so in a way that the other side can learn to play against to a degree, then it's fine. Unintended mechanics give new depth to otherwise boring kits, and I don't like to see that complexity go to waste. I feel like a lot of people in the community would agree with this. And yeah, just as I said to the last two answers, I'm probably just going to be parroting it. If it takes skill, keep it in the game. If it doesn't, and it's damaging to the game, take it out. Basically, that's it. Kind of like a lot of Blight's techs aren't that skillful, but a lot of Wesker's techs are skillful. So you kind of just need to know, a lot of give and take there. So yeah. Damien says, yes, Wesker, for example, would be one of the most boring killers to play if it wasn't full of unintended mechanics, just like Blight. Yep, exactly what I've been saying for the last three answers. I'm probably just going to be reading them and just going to be saying, yeah, I got the same answer, but you get the point. Machi says, I think yes, but should be controlled to a certain extent, and be available to do for controller players, since most certainly possible on PC. I do see where they're coming from, but at the same time, I feel like it is very hard to get a tech to work on different platforms, especially when they're unintended. But if we were to balance these unintended mechanics in the same way as intended mechanics, I do feel like this will be possible. So, I feel like this is like a null point, pretty much. Suma says this. It depends on the power. On the power it ends up giving the controlling player. I don't think anyone wants allegiance in doing cancel removed from the game, but when things become impossible to cancel, eagerly demos TP while carrying, they should probably get removed. More skill equals good. Yeah, the more skill from the mechanic, the more you should keep it in the game. The less skill from the mechanic and the more damaging it is to the game, then you should remove it, basically. Ghost says this. Absolutely, just like in fighting games, the devs should be stoked when players are creative and dedicate enough to push their designs past what they thought was possible. They just have to make sure that to recognize those texts and make sure they're fair and fun as possible. Yes. Overall, I feel like a lot of people are basically just saying that text should be created just like it intended mechanics, but should be balanced in a way to make it fun and fair for both sides, and I completely agree. Question 4 is, should DBD have a more community-focused balancing system, or should devs have all the power in the balance discussions? Explain your answer. Quinn says this. Community-focused. Personally, I think things like PTBs need to be more focused on that T part, testing. Right now, they feel more like a promo tool to hype new content 4 weeks in advance, and content on there is often already in the next update before they even got any feedback. Yes, I completely agree. It feels like PEBs are basically just promos and not actually being used for testing like they used to be back in the day. I do wish that they would actually listen to the community a bit more, but at the same time, I'm just hoping that model like dies out, honestly, just using the PTB for promo. Because that's not what a PTB is. A PTB is a testing space. Also, PTB should come to consoles at some point as well. I just want that to happen because I just want everyone to be on a level playing field and for them to have like fair feedback, because at the moment they're only getting PC feedback, which isn't really that fair when it comes to console players. That's the reason why there's so many like like performance issues on consoles and stuff, is because they're not actually doing the testing on multiple platforms. Lightborn says, more community focused than it's been, but I recognise the difficulty in that. Making decisions about around a big rule of data versus a big rule of wide assortment of voices is hard. Ultimately, data should be like taking a pulse. You understand the broad sense of what's happening. But if you go to a doctor and all they do is take your pulse and tell you to leave, you're probably going to want a different doctor. I think taking community polls and that can give direction on how folks feel about specific things could be a good method for gathering community insight. Completely agree. I do feel like they need to listen to the community a bit more, but it's up to them, really. Damien says this. It's good the way it is at the moment. The Reddit thing was actually a great idea. The AMA was a good idea, but I don't feel like that gains enough feedback in order for them to actually balance around the feedback from the community. At the moment, like I said earlier, it feels like they're working off feedback that is like years old instead of feedback that is around nowadays, if that makes sense. Suma says, I prefer an alternative to the Fog Whisperer program where they find actual top-level DBD players and bounce prototype ideas and balance changes off of them before starting implementation. That would probably help change the broad direction we're moving in. I completely agree. I feel like a lot of the Fog Whisperers are very skilled at the game. Two of the best candidates in my mind are probably Otstava and Hydro. Hydro being a very skilled Death Singer main. And Ots just being a very good killer main. Listening to feedback from those people, from your Fog Whisperers, would actually be way better than just having a big wall of text in front of you, especially since that localized data is basically like a top-down balance thing, where you're talking to the best of the best, and then you're balancing around them, and therefore, because you're balancing for the best of the best, then it trickles down, and therefore, the more casual players can still play that killer, but there'll be slight changes to them. Meanwhile, the people who have been playing that killer for a very long time can actually notice those changes and actually work around them in a meaningful way. But yeah, I feel like this will be a very good idea for them to use for balance. Thank you, Suma, by the way. Both, and I think they do. Take feedback and recognize your own limitations as a dev who spends more time working on it than playing it, and vice versa. Completely agree. A lot of devs out there do not actually play their own game, and most of the reason why is because they're way too busy working on the game. But the problem with that is that they don't, especially with behavior, is that they're not using the systems put in place for the community. They're not using those systems in order to balance the game. Like I said with Suma's answer, using the Fog Whisperer program in order to balance the game would actually be a very good idea. Since a lot of those players have been playing the game for thousands and thousands of hours and for multiple years, maybe even from the start of Dead by Daylight's creation. But yeah, I do understand that it's very hard to do, since devs don't have a lot of time, but I do feel like gathering new data based on good players and players that you know are good is probably the best way forward, honestly. Machi says, honest to God, they should have beta testers or a group of people selected by the community for said decisions, because I don't think completely having one or the other is a good choice. Completely agree. You should have beta testers, and then you should have an outside group of people who would give genuine, objective feedback, in order to basically make sure those changes are good for the community as a whole. So yeah, I completely agree with Machi here. The final question is, what area of Dead by Daylight's balance should be the focus moving forward? If possible, explain why this area is more important than others. Quinn says, perks and add-ons. Most add-on design lately is all the same with a little creativity, and perks I already touched upon are either overtuned or overcomplicated, leading to like 6 out of 10 perks out of the 246 being the meta. Completely agree, but I feel like that's an issue that just comes with time and development. But I do think that they have to actually think through add-ons a bit more. Like with Deathsinger is one of the worst killers when it comes to add-ons, because he just has such simplistic add-ons. When he has such like he has like a power with such like there's so much room for creativity with Deathsinger's power, and they're not using that for his add-ons basically, and that goes for a lot of other killers. I do feel like add-ons do need to actually be worked on. Same with perks, because yet again it just feels like there's a monopolization on both sides. Leading to very stale gameplay and very, just everything just gets very samey after a while. So yeah, Lightborn says the biggest area they should focus should be shaking things up with perking killer powers, taking risks and being willing to revert. One of DBD's strengths is a potential variety, but speaking practically, you don't see that variety because in most cases there is an okay choice and a super amazing choice. There are perks or powers that tower above all others in the game at present, making them the clear choice when someone can only derive fun from winning. So for me, I think the line needs to be a bit blurrier. Perk shakeups do a lot for community interest, and both in the short term and the long term. Tweaking the values for perks and watching the data that follows isn't crazy hard, and if you make an adjustment that doesn't work or ends up being problematic, you can revert. It's not a big deal. Take risks, be interesting. And ultimately, what do we have something like the public test build for if we are not actually going to use it for testing wacky stuff? We got one of the craziest PTBs when the devs were hella ambitious with a major mechanical change. That, but for perks and powers. Completely agree. I don't know what to say about that. That's just something, literally, I couldn't say it better. So, well done, Lightborn, like for well. Damien says they should nerf the best perks and buff weaker perks every 6 months in order to make the game more interesting. Also, add-ons for most killers are ass, and they need to rework most killers' add-ons, and rather than work on the current killers and then adding more and more killers to the game. So basically, instead of adding more killers to the game, Damien wants them to go back and basically do like a game health update, which I completely agree with. I think a lot of people would agree with that. Machi says, I think it should be buffing niche perks. Reason everyone is a slave to the meta is because they nerf the good things and sort of don't have a lot to compensate it. If we made perks like Red Herring and Hangman's great perks, we could see more variety in builds more often. Yes. I do feel like when a meta comes out, it's mostly just because those perks are so powerful to the point that no other perk can even like rival them. So having like every perk on in not every perk, but a lot of perks on an equal playing field would lead to different metas and different builds of different killers being possible instead of the killer's power motivating the builds that are being used for by a lot of players. So yeah, I completely agree with that. Suma says map design. A lot of the maps that have been reworked are arguably worse than they were in the first place. Behavior needs to consider how the changes that they make affects public opinion. No one likes the Garden of Glory rework. Everyone prefers old Macmillan, and Toba Landing is the worst map ever. Completely agree. Maps are a very big issue in the game at the moment, and it does feel like with a lot of the reworks, they don't actually take the community feedback. They just kind of work on their own thing. So yeah, again, I feel like that goes into more community-based balanced discussions. But then again, there's a lot to work on there. Ghost says, I really believe that they're doing a great job, and IMO, for almost 3 years of playing, in my time, I have seen the game improve. It's not linear, there's been ups and downs, but on average, it's better. They keep improving core game. They can keep improving the core gameplay loop with stuff like killer buffs and basic BT, or also improve solo queue communication and info mechanics. Keep polishing and improving the kits of older killers. My biggest gripe is MMR. I see it as a kind of financial decision, and it's a bummer to see it. Ranks were so much was a much better system. They could have improved instead. Yes, completely agree. MMR was a very big issue. Yosha says, yes, it's odd how they keep hook text, but they remove cookie flicks. The community usually has some dog shit takes, so I'd rather let the devs do it than the community. I mean, yeah, but I feel like having a 50-50 take, especially from the top, the very best players, especially killer players that one click or main a killer, would probably be better than taking info from the entire community as a whole. But yeah, that's basically going to be the video. I basically just wanted to go over like a bunch of stuff that I saw a lot of people like talk about. I'm probably just going to be uploading this in its entirety, with very little or maybe even like no editing. But yeah, I just wanted to get my thoughts out there and get my personal opinion out there about the questions and the answers that I got. So yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed, and I might actually make another video like this at some point if you guys actually want to see it. But yeah, see you guys. Love you, losers. Have a good one. Bye.